New Jersey, October 7th, High Point on Route 23 south to Rutherford Shelter. This is the week of our 18th anniversary, and we are back in New Jersey at High Point State Park, where we had done this section of the trail heading north to Deckertown Road in 2006. Today was a beautiful day, blue skies and no humidity with the temperatures in the 70s, a perfect day for a hike in the woods. This section of the trail had a lot of rocks, some that were small, a pointy. We had several beautiful views on our way up and along the ridgeline. The fall foliage is behind this year. Hurricane Irene and tons of other tropical storms have created very muddy trail conditions in some places and has caused the foliage to be delayed. The day was perfect in every way, a warm sun and blue skies. We passed through a nice pine forest and even an area with lots of white birch trees. Some squirrels were crashing through the leaves on the ground, and a chipmunk was running through the woods, sounding much larger than it was in this quiet forest. We saw some turkey vultures soaring above us on the ridgeline. Further down the trail, I found a large bear poop on the trail, and I wondered if we might see a bear. Lots of hikers had written in other hiking books that they had the most bear sighting in New Jersey. I had realized that we were getting closer to the shelter because I had remembered this rocky ledge that overlooked Rutherford Lake, shortly after I saw the Rutherford Shelter sign that was attached to the tree. I remembered climbing down this ledge to the shelter. We reached the shelter and found that since the last time that we were here, that they had a new outhouse that had a ramp, a new bear box, and that there was a satellite dish on top of the roof. Inside the shelter, we found a plug outlet. However, there is no power going to the shelter. The pipe from the satellite dish also had no wires. How weird is that? I did not like the fake items on the shelter, as I did not see any humor in them, and I always enjoy the look of the rustic shelters in the woods. We headed to Rutherford Lake, and we could hear geese honking as we got closer to the lake. I decided to take the Iris Trail back to our truck camper, and it was on a nice dirt road. We reached the camper, and we camped in the overnight parking area at High Point State Park. I was shocked to find that Dave had got me a gift bag for our anniversary. He had got me a candle that was nice and relaxing during our night here, and some hiking snacks for our hike. It was a very peaceful night here with a full moon and the sounds of crickets. October 8th, Goodrich Road south to Route 519. We had done this section in April of 2008 when we had found the secret shelter. We are splitting up, and Dave dropped me off on Goodrich Road, and I will be heading south over to Route 519, and he will be heading north. This section was mostly in the hardwoods. The trees here were mostly smooth beech, the one that people carve their names into. I also found some smooth dark green trees with a ridged bark. I reached an area with a lot of water on the trail and mud. I later crossed a couple of small bridges over some small streams. I climbed up a large hill that was a constant climb up in the direction of High Point State Park. I reached an open field where I could see the monument, and then I reached a cow stile at Gemmer Road, where I finally met up with Dave. We had our two-way radios with us on this trip, so I was able to talk with him before we got together here. We ate our snack here on a rock, and I saw a couple of garter snakes. It was getting warmer with the temperature around 80 degrees with a little humidity. The mosquitoes and the gnat were back out and having a feast with our neck, face, and arms. This area was mostly in a residential area, and we were never far from the roads and traffic. It was a boring section of the trail, not much scenery. However, I did see some asters and goldenrods along with some fall flowers in the fields. Same day, Unionville Road south to Liberty Corners Road. This section of the AT is the worst piece that we had ever hiked. The trail went through the town of Unionville. There was constant traffic noise that you could hear from the trail, and loud voices from all the houses along the trail. The trail went behind residential houses, and their backyard was right alongside of the trail. We started the trail at around 2 o'clock because the drive over was very slow with heavy traffic, and we had to move the camper twice as Dave had to drop me off on Union Road, and he had to drive over to Liberty Corners Road. Right off from the start of the trail, I came to a group of the local teens on the trail. They had a large fire on the trail and they were cutting down live trees that were near the trail. The teens had set up two large tents right on the trail. One of the girls and one of the guys were laying in one of the tent. They laughed at me as I was walking by the tent. Another guy near the tent yelled out, "Oh, a woman hiking all alone?" I felt very uncomfortable passing by them. We had our radios, and I radioed Dave, and the sound of his voice on the radio was very nice as I continued past the group. I found a pile of human poop on the trail that had toilet paper over it. I found more human poop further down the trail, and the toilet paper with poop on it was thrown over the trees and bushes along the trail. Later, I had to pass by a resident that was living right up to the trail. There was a kennel with barking dogs right next to the trail. I then reached Lot Road and crossed the residential street with lots of houses on it. They were low-income homes and looked run down with lots of trash and household debris in the yards that was along the road and near the trail. It was a horrible area. I reached a section of the trail that was part of an old railroad bed, and some guy had come up behind me on a bike and had startled me. I did not even know that he was behind me, and he did not even alert me that he was passing me on the AT. I was happy when I reached Dave. We did not take a long break because I had feared that he would come upon the youths later in the day and that the group might be larger and more rowdy. Dave had turned 50 and had an old age combat hat that he had got as a gift from my family. We switched hats so he would not entice the youths to make fun of him. I reached a field with a view. However, the mosquitoes were so bad here that I could not enjoy it, so I just kept pushing it down the trail. I reached the Wallkill Preserve, which is a larger swamp. It was late when I was passing through it. It did have a lot of birds, swans, and geese. However, the bugs here were horrendous. It was just as worse as it was when we did Baxter State Park in Maine back in June of 2005. When I reached the camper, I was unable to start the truck. I put the key in the ignition, but it did not do anything when I turned the key. I radioed Dave about it, and he asked me if I had the right key. I had forgot that the key for the door is a spare key that we use to lock the truck. The ignition key has a chip in it that is needed to start the truck, that never leaves the cab of the truck, as it is the only one that we have. I picked up Dave and we drove over to the end of a dead-end road near an old abandoned factory. It was off of Old City Road. The trail had walked this road. A red-tailed hawk was perched on a down tree just behind the camper where we had parked for the night. During the night, I heard my favorite bird, a barred owl, was hooting very close to us. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? We had also heard some geese and some crickets during the night. What an awesome camping experience. October 9th, Liberty Corners Road, north to Route 565. It is our 18th anniversary today. Dave had dropped me off, and I am heading north, and Dave is heading south. My side started right off with a climb up. I reached an abandoned house right from the start of the trail. There was a sign on the trail that pointed off the trail for water, and I followed the well-worn trail to the back of the abandoned house. The house had a gorgeous view of the valley. It was wonderful that someone had given hikers access to the water faucet in the back of the house. I returned to the trail and continued the climb up. It was a hard climb with the high humidity and the temperatures in the upper 80s. The bugs were loving this weather, and they were loving being all over me too. It has been a very hot Columbus Day weekend. I reached Pochuck Mountain Shelter, and the shelter was very clean, a little on the small size as compared to the other shelters that we had seen so far on the AT. No one was at the shelter. I left a note in the shelter logbook warning hikers heading south of Unionville and of the teens partying on the trail. Maybe a ridge runner, a staff member on the Appalachian Trail who provides trail maintenance, guidance, and education to hikers will see this note and check on this area. I started to climb up some more after leaving the shelter to a nice open ridge area with a nice view. I radioed Dave. He said that he was also on top of a ridge line and he would wait for me there. I met up with Dave and the view here was even better. We sat here and ate our snack. It was very peaceful here, and we could see Wallkill Preserve that we had hiked around yesterday. We could also see the chimney of the mill that we had camped at last night. This was the only view that we had on this section of the trail, and it was a great view. We separated again, and I reached another open rock area, and I called Dave on the radio again. He told me that he had got confused as to which way the AT had went. He listens to an audiobook as he is hiking alone and had missed the double blaze where the trail had turned off another trail. Sometimes we come onto other trails that cross or walk the trail for a period of time before the two trails branch off. He had missed the turn and had went straight on the trail for about 15 minutes before he had noticed that he had not seen any white blazes on any trees. He turned around and headed back up and found the double white blaze where he was supposed to turn. He was lucky that he had not kept going. Who knows how far he would have gone before he had reached the end of that trail. I passed an area that had a dirt road that went to a youth camp. There was a sign here that said, "Happy Trails." This area had a lot of mud on the trail, and the mosquitoes here were really bad. I passed through an area with lots of cedar trees and white pine trees before I reached our truck camper. I headed over to pick up Dave, and there was a lot of traffic on the road. It was very unrelaxing coming out of the peace and quiet of the woods into heavy road traffic. There was a large festival going on here, and Route 94 was at a dead stop with all the traffic, and we were stuck in it for about 45 minutes. We reached the AT parking, and to our dismay, we found that the parking lot was full for the festival. We decided to drive further north to Canal Road, where we had planned to spend the night. However, this parking lot had a large group of youths here, so we could not stay the night here. We did hike in a short distance on the trail and reached an area that had boardwalks and a footbridge over a stream and a wet area. The bridge and the boardwalks were all destroyed by Hurricane Irene. We decided to just head home, and now we are camping in a commuter parking lot off of Interstate 84 because, you guessed it, we got into another traffic jam.